Generative AI is on everyone's mind, but there's so many concerns and caution, especially when it comes to city services and information. City AI Connect is a digital platform that was created by the Center for Government Excellence at Johns Hopkins University in partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies. So, Claudia, I want to start with you. Why did Bloomberg Philanthropies want to take on this very timely project and initiative?
City AI Connect is really the first of its kind global digital platform for city officials from around the world to learn and trial generative AI together. And when our government innovation team here at Bloomberg Philanthropies, together with our partners at Johns Hopkins University, first set out to launch City AI Connect in October 2023, we really took a deep look at where cities were and spoke to a lot of mayors and municipalities from around the world directly. And what we found was quite fascinating. While nearly 3/4 of cities surveyed shared that they are actively exploring, testing, or implementing generative AI tools or technologies, only 11% had really invested in building staff capacities that are necessary to deliver. And just 13% had really put the policies and guidelines in place that are needed to govern its use. And from our work in the space, we really know that cities need those foundational components to drive the kind of Gen AI implementation that can really move their municipalities forward.
Did you find that their hesitancy was just maybe caution about the technology, but also the realization of not having the expertise internally within government to take this on?
I think it was a bit of both what you are mentioning. There are certainly the common concerns that are associated with data use. Do I have the right technical expertise in-house and so on and so forth? But I think what's really different about generative AI is this is a much more accessible technology. So it's something that mayors have in their back pocket on their phone. And so cities really needed to think differently about it than other data technologies that they have deployed. And they needed guardrails, city-wide policies and regulations to really make sure that everyone in the city knows how to use this responsibly.
We're going to hear from some of the end users in a moment, but just to set the stage, can you just clarify a little bit more what City AI Connect is? It's a digital platform, but how are mayors, cities actually using it?
Yes, so it's a safe space for cities only. So city officials can join. And what they're finding on the platform is a couple of things. I think very important is the ability to connect to each other. It's about peer learning. It's about exchanging ideas and insights around the use and the guardrails that are needed to implement this technology. But it also provides pro bono access to technical assistance. That means that we have expert-led live sessions on specific topics, and we have a resource library where cities can find things that other cities have already implemented and find exciting.
Denise Riedl is joining us from the city of South Bend, Indiana. And Denise, you're experimenting with generative AI. How is this technology changing innovation in the work that you're doing in local city government?
It's changing the local government workplace so much. In South Bend, I think that we're like a lot of cities where Gen AI is changing city operations in both big ways and small ways. And I mean that in a good way. When it comes to the big changes, how is IT procurement and governance going to work given generative AI? What are the new things we need to write into contracts now given generative AI? How do we want to approach university partnerships differently when it comes to generative AI? There are all these big governance questions that we're tackling and lots of other cities are tackling as well. But when it comes to small things that are very transformative, generative AI is changing the way lawyers might start contracts. It's changing the way someone might start a job description. It's changing the way an analyst might start a project. It's changing the way we develop, analyze data. It's so transformative for just everyday workplace situations and very tactical project level work. And that change happening at both polars is just so interesting. That's a lot of what we're managing, is going back and forth between those big, meaty governance questions, those systemic questions, and those everyday questions where we're trying to build capacity, train employees, build up responsible users. So that's kind of the day-to-day, I think, of most cities, but especially it's how I feel it in South Bend.
Now, Kyle Patterson, you are working in the city of Boise, Idaho. How did you decide to join City AI Connect and why?
Obviously, generative AI is a brand new technology. We're all still figuring out how to use it together. Nobody has all the answers. So in the city of Boise, we've tried to take an approach of responsible experimentation, of shared learning, of empowering our staff to try new things around generative AI and make sure they're doing it safely and responsibly. That includes a group of AI ambassadors who are members of different departments who work with their peers to help them use AI effectively. It includes an AI community of practice, so staff can get together once a month and talk about AI and what's working and not working. As Denise mentioned, it also includes a really heavy dose of education. We want to make sure our staff are aware of the risks of AI and know the city guidelines and AI policy. And that's worked really well for us. We've seen staff use AI really creatively. One of the things that drew me to the City AI Connect is that it takes that approach that we have in Boise of shared learning and scales it across the globe. So rather than me learning from my peers who work at the City of Boise how to make AI work, I'm learning from my peers at the City of Helsinki and the City of South Bend. And that's really valuable because we're all experiencing the same challenges and the same opportunities.
Did you lay out rules of engagement? Like in the early stages, how did you introduce this to staffs? How did you take it to the agencies that you're working with? And how did you build in the parameters of what they could and couldn't do?
That's a great question. Rules of engagement, it sounds a little like war. Luckily, in South Bend, I feel like it was a very peaceful adoption of generative AI. I think like a lot of cities, our first step was just to survey our workforce. And so we started not really knowing what the appetite was for generative AI, who was using it already, who was interested in using it. We did a survey with our city workforce, and then we built personas to understand, okay, what problems are we trying to solve when it comes to governance? Where do we want to start with guidelines? And that was enormously helpful. And connecting that to City AI Connect, we were able to post that survey and share the results with other cities and start that conversation around how are you diagnosing what's going on. South Bend was fortunate in the sense that because we did that survey work, I think we were able to craft our internal guidelines, our rules of engagement around what we knew employees were most concerned about, what their biggest questions were. We were able to meet them where they were. There was a lot of curiosity to tap. We were able to craft training around some of their biggest questions and their biggest anxieties. So that was an enormously useful first step for us. And we've already gone through 2 iterations of our guidelines, and the technology is changing so much, just like Kyle mentioned. It can be hard to keep up with how the products are changing, what the products do is changing, how the products are factoring in privacy and data security is changing. The government specific products are changing. So I wouldn't be surprised if we went through at least 1 or 2 more iterations this year of the guidelines. Very much a moving target.
Kyle, can you give us some examples? You said that there was a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity from your folks in Boise, but also things that you've learned through City AI Connect. Other really creative ideas that have emerged that you've tested out in your city that are really working well. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, early research on generative AI has really shown that if you use it for the right task, it can help you do your job better and faster. And that's really been our approach early in the city of Boise. One example, we have a librarian who was going to create an ancient literature book club for the library over the summer. She used ChatGPT to come up with a list of books. She used ChatGPT to come up with a curriculum for that book club to create marketing materials. And so she saved probably 6 or 7 hours of work by using this tool. And it made the book club better than it would have been otherwise because she was able to include some book titles that she probably wouldn't have thought of without the use of ChatGPT. That's just one of many examples of ways government staff are using it to make services for the public better, but also to save themselves time so they can do more good for the community.
Claudia, you have a bird's eye view. You get to see what all the different cities are doing and learning. What are some ways that you've seen that local leaders are utilizing the platform since the recent launch? And what are some of the optimal use cases you're hoping to see in the future?
There are already a lot of exciting use cases out there. So there's, for example, Chattanooga city that we are working with as part of the City Data Alliance, and they are using AI to advance their 311 system to really respond much faster to citizens' requests. There are cities such as Buenos Aires and Bogota who have individualized to better deliver services for residents. What I'm particularly pleased with, though, is that on the platform, it really turned into the peer engagement platform that we were hoping for. So cities themselves are organizing and are leading discussions on topics. So really creating that for cities by cities environment that we were hoping and striving for. There was a very interesting live session that we had recently that Helsinki and Wentzville, Missouri had proposed together because both of them, cities of very different nature and size, found themselves on the platform and wanted to talk about upskilling staff and how to do that. So it's those kinds of experiences that I'm excited about. And I see the next step as going deeper on more complex use cases and really thinking about how can cities collaborate using City AI Connect as the starting point.
Denise, as the Chief Innovation Officer in South Bend, are there any particular AI applications that you're most excited about?
I'm very much interested in using AI and generative AI as it aligns to our city's biggest priorities. Technology should always be in service to our city. So in South Bend, that's neighborhood infrastructure and public safety. We're developing and thinking about how generative AI and AI can help with those goals. I've decided as a CIO for the city to very much start with what I consider to be low risk, high reward applications for generative AI. I think they build really goodwill internally at the city, and they also demonstrate some quick wins without a lot of concerns around data security and ethics. And so what I would consider these two low risk, high reward examples we're building out this year for the city are streamlined document translation for the entire city. So we're building this new low code product with generative AI that allows any city staffer to submit flyers, reports, documentation for very quick generative AI translation with a human process afterwards, right? Human review, which is a very important step in any kind of generative AI product or solution, the human component to it. And then the second big low risk, high reward internal case that we're building out now is our internal department assistant, Ida. She's our internal chatbot. Several other cities have built these out. And what's really compelling is the data isn't that sensitive, right? You're using not data about people, you're using really dense PDFs, things about benefits, things about procurement policies, travel policies, IT policies, really dense, meaty, hard to read and manage internal policies. Even as a city leader, I find myself reading and rereading very dense procurement policies and process maps. But when you can just say, hey, I'm procuring this widget at this number, what's my next step? I feel like part of my job this year, in addition to figuring out these governance questions, is to find some really compelling collective wins that build momentum and trust around AI, and again, that low risk way. So far, we're getting some excitement from people in the city that didn't really care about generative AI before or were worried about generative AI. And I think these types of use cases have really made their ears perk up and made them a bit more excited about the possibilities.
And Kyle, what are some of the concerns local leaders had implementing generative AI in Boise?
It's many of the same concerns we all have in conversation about AI, right? We know these generative AI tools can be biased. They can hallucinate. They can make up things that aren't true. There's the potential for bad actors to use these tools in bad ways to spread misinformation, which is really dangerous to our democracy. But I think in conversation with our leadership, folks also realized that AI is inescapably here, right? It's here whether we want it to be or not. And so the question we're trying to answer here is how might we leverage the benefits of these tools whilst managing some of those risks? And that's an ever-changing environment, right? The way that we answer that question next year is going to be probably different than the way that we answer that now. But it's also been made for some really interesting and important conversations, because the reason why AI can be biased is because it's trained on human data and humans are biased, right? And so not only has it created an opportunity to talk about bias in AI and how we protect against that, but also like how do we protect against our own bias in our work? How do we protect against the bias of our colleagues in our work? And so in some ways, it's really started some conversations that we wouldn't have been able to have otherwise.
What types of challenges are residents facing in Boise that you think generative AI can help? And is there a specific example of a city challenge that you've encountered and a staff member has come back with a solution that you've been really blown away by?
I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'm really excited for future opportunities. So just one example, a big challenge in Boise is housing affordability. We just don't have enough housing of all types in our community. But if a homeowner, say, wants to build an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, like a small housing unit in your backyard, that can be really challenging and there can be a lot of barriers for that, especially if you don't have experience as a developer. And I can imagine generative AI really playing a big role in reducing those barriers. Like you could imagine a chatbot that you could ask, does the zoning code allow me to build an ADU in my backyard? Based on setback requirements, where should I put it in my yard? What are some pre-approved plans that I have that I could choose from? And then even further out, if we get to a point that people are predicting where we have AI agents, you could imagine somebody saying, look at my finances and tell me what I can afford for an ADU. Now find me a contractor, go through the city permitting process for me. So those sorts of tools can be really powerful in reducing barriers for residents to do the sorts of things that are helpful to the community and could potentially even result in more housing supply, which could be really valuable. I feel like we're also not there yet. One of the big concerns I have with generative AI tools for the public is the propensity to hallucinate, right? The last thing we want is to spread false information to the public. And so that's something we're going to have to overcome and figure out before we're ready to do those larger scale solutions.
Claudia, can you share with us a key data point about generative AI in city government that you think our listeners should be aware of? The technology is changing so quickly and advancing so quickly. How do you keep up?
Yes, I think my data point speaks exactly to that. That's the discrepancy for me between the 75% of mayors who say they see immense potential in this technology and they really want it for their city. And they understand how it can increase performance, but ultimately also increase impact at the resident level. But at the same time, only 7% have started to implement that technology in their city. And that means that platforms such as City AI Connect are so critical in helping those mayors close that gap and be able to learn from each other and move forward and really realize that potential.
And Denise, from your neck of the woods in South Bend, a key data point that you want to share?
One thing that was apparent in the survey we deployed last year was a good percentage of our staff felt anxiety around job security and just the future of work. A lot of these people that felt this anxiety in relation to the introduction of generative AI weren't necessarily users, but they were observers. They're wondering how their job is going to fit into the future of local government, the future of these types of teams, given the way this technology is emerging. And I feel like that's really important. I'm really optimistic about this technology. And I feel like the City AI Connect platform does have this inherent optimism to it, which is great as you do that cross-city collaboration, share documents and project ideas. But there is a very real sense of the change management challenge that we're all facing. And I feel like that's something that is important to keep in the conversation. How do we upskill our workforce? How do we get them comfortable with these tools? How do we help them to see how their jobs fit around these tools and how their skill sets might evolve? So just helping people change their mindset and then also giving them the skills they need to evolve as the technology evolves, I think is a really important conversation of all of this change.
And Kyle, what's a key takeaway from the journey so far that you'd like to share?
One of the things I love about local government is there's a spirit of collaboration that we're happy to share work products, to share learnings, and that's just so valuable to me. Denise mentioned the staff survey she did in South Bend, and I think depending on your perspective, either stole or borrowed heavily from that when we did a staff survey. I've definitely been influenced by other cities' AI guidelines. And so just having that platform there has been really valuable for me as we've gone down this road. And frankly, it can be a bit therapeutic. We're all experiencing the same challenges. We're all thinking and talking about how to manage staff anxiety around this. And it's just so valuable to have peers in other cities who are doing some of the same work.
City AI Connect is unique in the sense that it really is a repository of tools, and you can go really deep and you can get really technical. You can share the nuts and bolts of a project. You have Anchorage, Boston, sharing project level things that they're doing in generative AI, really specific use cases that other cities can try. And that kind of on the ground sharing, it's really nice to have a space for that.
I started working in city government in 2002 when Mike Bloomberg was mayor of the city of New York and I was the film commissioner. And I have to say that they were working on electric typewriters and processing permits by hand in the office. And I said in the first month, we were getting rid of the electric typewriters and we were introducing computers. That was not very well received. Change is difficult. And yes, there's enthusiasm, but not everybody is on board with this. And there are concerns and fears. But I think that to your credit of having an opportunity to talk, share best practices, educate, inform. And the best thing is to say, you know what, we tried this, it worked, and that you give illustrations and case studies to other folks, and that helps secure buy-in and adoption. So thank you for all of your good work and your commitment. Good luck with everything.